You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. Curtis Yarvin, born in 1973 and often writing under the name Mencius Moldbug, is well known in the American blogging sphere. Together with philosopher Nick Land, he initiated a philosophical movement known as the Dark Enlightenment, or neo-reactionary movement, which is characterized by its opposition to democratic and egalitarian principles. Through his blog Unqualified Reservations, active from 2007 to 2014, and his more recent project, a Substack page titled Grey Mirror, launched in 2020, Yarvin presented a critical view of American democracy. He suggested that the system has failed and proposed it should be replaced by a form of governance akin to a corporation structure, which he calls an accountable monarchy. His views have led to him being tagged as a neo-reactionary and neo-monarchist. Yarvin controversially compares liberalism to a matrix-like totalitarian system and advocates for the replacement of American democracy with a techno-monarchy. In 2002, Yarvin embarked on a personal software venture that evolved into the Urbit networked computing platform. By 2013, he co-founded Tlon, a company set up to manage Urbit, and played a leading role there until stepping down in 2019. Curtis Yarvin was born in 1973 into an educated and liberal family with secular views. His paternal grandparents were Jewish Americans and identified as communists. Curtis's dad, Herbert Yarvin, served as a foreign service officer for the United States government, while his mom hailed from a Protestant background in Westchester County. In 1985, Curtis returned to the States and was accepted into Johns Hopkins' study of mathematically precocious youth. He went on to graduate from Brown University in 1992. After that, he briefly pursued a PhD in computer science at the University of California, Berkeley, but left a year and a half later to dive into the tech industry. During the 1980s and 1990s, the libertarian and tech-oriented culture of Silicon Valley had a major impact on Yarvin. He delved into right-wing and American conservative literature, guided by Glenn Reynolds, a libertarian professor of law at the University of Tennessee. Reynolds introduced him to the works of Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard, notable figures who rejected empirical evidence in favor of deduction from basic principles. This approach deeply influenced Yarvin's way of thinking. The pseudonym Curtis Yarvin chose for himself, Mencius Moldbug, blends the classical name Mencius with a nod to Goldbug, reflecting his unique take on philosophy and economics. Back in 2002, the visionary behind the Urbit computer platform, Yarvin, set out to create a decentralized network made up of personal servers. Fast forward to 2013, he took a step further by launching a San Francisco-based company named Tlon Corporation alongside partners. Their mission? To expand Urbit's capabilities. They even caught the eye of Peter Thiel's venture capital group, the Founders Fund, which decided to back their ambitious project with funding. In 2016, Yarvin found himself in the spotlight for the technical intricacies of Urbit, specifically its approach to functional programming. He was all set to share his insights at Lambda Conference 2016. However, his participation led to a significant fallout. 5 speakers dropped out, 2 sub-conferences were called off, and several sponsors retraced their steps. By January 2019, Yarvin turned a new page by stepping down from his position at Tlon. However, he didn't wash his hands off Urbit entirely. He remains connected, holding on to some intellectual and financial stakes in the project's future. Yarvin was heavily influenced by the works of Thomas Carlyle, who led him to believe that libertarianism wouldn't work unless it embraced some form of authoritarianism. He also took a significant turn away from supporting democracy after reading Hans Hermann Hoppe's book Democracy, the God That Failed in 2001. Another key influence on his thinking was James Burnham, who argued that the real workings of politics are controlled by elites, hidden behind what appears to be democratic or socialist systems. The unsuccessful attempts by the United States to build nations in Iraq and Afghanistan during the 2000s, along with the federal government's handling of the financial crisis in 2008 and Barack Obama's election, all contributed to Yarvin becoming more critical of democracy and more convinced of his libertarian and anti-democratic views. He believed these events demonstrated a historical shift towards more left-leaning societies. In 2007, Yarvin started a blog called Unqualified Reservations to share his political ideas. In one of his early posts, he coined a new meaning for the phrase red pill, borrowed from the movie The Matrix, to describe the process of seeing through what he considered the illusions of progressive politics. By 2013, he dialed back his posts on the blog to focus on developing Urbit, a project unrelated to his blogging efforts. In April 2016, he announced that Unqualified Reservations had completed its mission, and he mostly stopped updating it. As of 2022, Yarvin continues to share his viewpoints on a platform called Substack through a page named Grey Mirror. Yarvin has a unique perspective on American politics, naming the real power players as the cathedral. He describes this as a partnership between universities and mainstream media that influences public opinion. Yarvin argues that a Brahmin social class, similar to the highest class in India's caste system, holds a significant sway in the United States, guiding the population towards progressive values. He compares this influence to how religious beliefs are spread amongst followers, suggesting that these progressive ideas weaken the social structure. Yarvin believes that gradual political changes aren't enough. Instead, he thinks society needs a complete overhaul, or a hard reset. He prefers a strategy of passive resistance over active protest, suggesting that progressivism would lose its grip without resistance from the right. He is a proponent of creating new systems that allow people to exit the current political scenario, rather than fighting it directly. He supports a neo-cameralist system, drawing inspiration from historical figures and governments. This concept involves replacing democratic systems with a corporate-like structure, where an executive, similar to a chief executive officer, has total control but is accountable to large stakeholders. Yarvin praises authoritarian figures and systems for their efficiency and market focus, critiquing the United States for its soft approach on crime and its adherence to democracy. From a right-libertarian viewpoint, Yarvin argues for authoritarian governments that are minimal but effective, offering freedom in personal matters but maintaining a clear hierarchical system in governance. Joshua Tate, a scholar, points out the contradictions in Yarvin's ideas, highlighting his support for social freedoms yet his advocacy for a hierarchical society that borrows from monarchical and reactionary concepts. Under the pseudonym Moldbug, Yarvin gave a talk at the 2012 BIL conference, discussing the idea of rebooting the United States government. He used this opportunity to criticize historical narratives and political correctness, promoting the Retire All Government Employees initiative. Yarvin introduced the term formalism, advocating for a recognition and restructuring of political power that abandons progressive ideologies. His term neo-reactionary to describe his viewpoint surfaced in 2008, presenting a blend of monarchist and libertarian ideas. Influential figures in the tech and libertarian spheres, including Peter Thiel and Steve Bannon, have shown interest in Yarvin's ideas. Thiel, in particular, has been a significant supporter, sharing Yarvin's skepticism about the compatibility of democracy and freedom. Investor Balaji Srinivasan has also proposed a society led by technology, reflecting Yarvin's call for a new form of governance. Yarvin is often seen as a figure aligned with the alt-right, according to journalists and commentators. Mike Wendling, a journalist, refers to Yarvin as the alt-right's favorite philosophy instructor. Unqualified Reservations, Yarvin's blog, is perceived by Tate as a sophisticated precursor and equivalent to the bold and politically incorrect discussions found in online spaces like 4chan and Slashpoll. Despite this, Yarvin himself has taken steps to distance his views from the alt-right label. In a private conversation, he advised Milo Yiannopoulos, who was working for Breitbart News at the time, to treat neo-Nazis with disdainful superiority, similar to how a disdainful reporter from the New York Times might treat anarchist protesters. James Pogue, writing for Vanity Fair, notes that Yarvin's posts on unqualified reservations can be shockingly right-wing, emphasizing an instance where Yarvin criticized the Norwegian terrorist Anders Behring Breivik, not for the act of terrorism itself, but for its ineffectiveness against Norway's government, which he referred to as communist. Yarvin also controversially compared Nelson Mandela's past endorsement of violent tactics to Breivik's actions, suggesting a provocative viewpoint on both figures. Matt McManus described Yarvin in Commonweal magazine as comparable to an authoritarian version of David Foster Wallace, directing his eclectic and often questionable historical narratives and thinly veiled prejudices at disenchanted young white men. Yarvin received significant media attention in February 2017, when Politico magazine reported that Steve Bannon, the White House chief strategist under President Donald Trump, was a reader of Yarvin's blog. It was suggested that Yarvin had a line of communication to the White House through an intermediary, a story that was repeated by several major publications. However, Yarvin denied having direct contact with Bannon to Vox, and humorously remarked to The Atlantic that his link to the White House was through a Twitter user named Bronze Age Pervert. He also gave a copy of a book by Bronze Age Pervert to Michael Anton, who had a senior national security role in the Trump administration. Curtis Yarvin has made claims suggesting that white people have higher IQs than black people due to genetic reasons. He has been labeled as a supporter of slavery today, a label with which he disagrees. Additionally, Yarvin has stated that certain races are more naturally inclined towards slavery. In one of his writings, where he positively references Steve Saylor and Jared Taylor, he mentioned, "It should be obvious that, although I am not a white nationalist, I am not exactly allergic to the stuff." Moreover, in 2009, Yarvin commented that the civil rights programs in the US, aimed at populations with a recent history of hunting and gathering who supposedly lack a strong moral character, produced absolute human garbage. Despite these statements, Yarvin has denied being racist. In his essays, Why I Am Not a White Nationalist and Why I Am Not an Anti-Semite, he delves into a somewhat understanding examination of these beliefs before ultimately distancing himself from them. He has also expressed that using IQ tests to measure superiority feels creepy to him. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.